Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, February 27th. We're late this evening at 8:30. A number of us had other meetings prior to this. In fact, one of our colleagues will be up shortly, so we'll begin. Our agenda this evening is to, I'm going to hold the minutes till Paul comes here. And then we have some warrant articles to discuss, a special legislation regarding the special education financing article, the South Shore Regional Emergency Center, the SHREC budget, which is the dispatch budget, an open meeting law discussion, and then appointments and selectmen, and then we have an executive session concerning a real estate negotiation. So, as I said, we'll hold the minutes until Mr. Healy returns. So I'd like to open up the session with a discussion on special education financing, and we have two people who have done this all their lives, it seems. They're coming back. So, Laura, Ms. Burns, have a seat. Linda, welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Member of the board. Where's the other member of the board?
He's wandering up.
Okay, good. We're here this evening to bring to you the recommendation of the working group on special education finance. We have a warrant article we have proposed, and that's what we're hearing tonight. The group was formed 2 years ago, right after the budget year, in which we had the incident, which we'll all recall, when after the school budget had been created for the next year, we had 3 students move into town, causing the special education budget to spike by over $500,000, which was not reflected in the budget that had just been put together by the school committee. And for those of us who were involved in the budgeting that year, that was a really difficult sled, trying to find that $500,000 that was completely unpredictable and completely out of the town's control in terms of whether or not we were going to spend that $500,000 and how to find the money without damaging other programs. That was really a big problem. And as a result of that event, the advisory committee asked that the town look into whether or not there was a way to prevent something like this from happening again. So the Special Education Finance Working Group was formed with representation from the school committee. I am the representation of your board on the committee, several citizens, staff from the school department, and liaisons from the advisory committee. And so we have worked for a couple of years, and we went through a number of exercises. We spent some time working on getting a grip on the problem, on the special education budget. How does it work? That took some time, as you can probably imagine. And then we did kind of a review of what other states do relative to how you fund special education, because we asked ourselves, is it possible that there's a better way to do this that we don't know about? And the conclusion of our committee was, no, there isn't. The story is that there are many different ways of funding special education from state to state. Every state is dissatisfied with their method. So many states switch methods with great difficulty and find that they're no more satisfied with the new method than the old method. And we decided that just figuring out how to reinvent the wheel was probably not the best place to put our efforts. So then we put our attention on what we thought were the most important aspects of it for our own town budgeting, which is what brought us into it in the first place. And we came up with 3 priorities, which we thought we should try to find solutions for. The first was an issue of the timing of when the money comes in. One of the problem that was created when the students moved into town is not only did they move in after the budget was prepared for the following year, but the spike in payments, some of which would be reimbursed by the state, doesn't begin to be reimbursed by the state until the school year is over, and then we bill for the money we have already laid out quarterly over the next year. And so so it's nice to get the reimbursements from the state, but it doesn't solve the problem at the time that the problem is created. And so we thought it might be nice to look for a way to tighten that up a little bit.
Let me just jump in. And the reimbursements come in
Did you-
in the next year, but that fourth quarter sometimes gets delayed to the following year, so it's not
So
even
it
in
could
the
be a
next.
15-month delay.
It doesn't even arrive in
Okay.
the correct fiscal year.
Okay.
And then there's always the chance that the state will discover that they cannot fund the special education circuit breaker reimbursements at the 75% level, which the legislation indicates, because they don't have enough money. And that has happened repeatedly during the course of the recession. I remember a year when it went as low as the teens, the reimbursement level.
remember
So you can't really even budget that for the next year. Another issue is increases in tuition from year to year for the out-of-district placements, which are extremely expensive. This is something that can theoretically be accommodated in the budget for the following year, but sometimes the increases are so great, and the town has no control over those increases, that it can have a very negative impact on the regular education budget. So I was telling you about the three items. The second item was that we wanted to put up our voice to the town's voice to urge that circuit breaker be fully funded, including transportation costs, which were transportation costs for special education were supposed to be included in the original legislation that created the circuit breaker, included transportation costs, but it's never been actually funded.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's like $500,000 a year, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, for sped only.
Yeah.
Yep.
And of course, the transportation comes along with the expensive tuitions, because if you have an expensive tuition that suddenly arrives for an out-of-district school, often there's a transportation cost that goes along with that that's on top of the very expensive tuition. And funding of transportation was the third thing that we thought if we could make some progress on that would be great. So when we came up with these.
Well, actually, we really talked about the super expensive kids.
Right. Transportation and funding circuit breaker came together. And then finally, there was the question of whether or not there are some tuitions that are so expensive, they might cost $250,000 for one student. And we asked the question whether or not there were certain placements that were so expensive that we really felt that the student should be the responsibility of the state when it gets to that level. Because what happened with us was 3 students moved in with very expensive placements. Our budget went up by $500,000. The next year, those students moved out. And so then we have budgeted money that we don't have to spend. That's okay, that's great for us, but they moved into some other town and created the exact same budgeting chaos situation that happens when it comes here. And all of these children are the children of all of us. And it seemed to us like once you reach a certain point of expense that perhaps we should get more help from the state in picking up the extra funding so that it doesn't impact from town to town everybody's budget so much. I know from talking to people from other towns that in smaller towns, it's one thing for here in Hingham when somebody moves in and it costs $250,000 and we can somehow move things around because of the size of our budget. But in a tiny town with maybe residents of 1,000 or 2,000, it can be a huge portion of the entire town budget when somebody with a tuition that size moves in. It's much more difficult problem. Same size tuition, but much more difficult problem for a smaller town. So we took our 3 priorities and met with Representative Alice Peisch, who is the chair of the Education Committee on the House side, and we shared our concerns with her. And her feeling about it was our 3 priorities. We talked about the difficulties of funding it. She said she felt that transportation, probably we were not going to make any progress on that because it's just too expensive. She didn't see how it was going to happen. She had never really heard or grappled with the the timing problem of the funding, which surprised us because she was originally she came from the school committee in Wellesley, so we were surprised that she, wasn't familiar with that issue. But interestingly, she said she thought it was quite possible that the legislature might be ready to act on the third issue we raised, which was the issue of extraordinarily expensive tuitions. Could the state change its funding formula so that they would pick up more of that? She actually thought that might be a possibility.
Okay.
So that brings us to the warrant article that we wrote, the priorities that have to do with funding the circuit breaker fully in transportation. We put that in a proposed piece of legislation that we'd like to suggest that the board ask our representatives to file, but we're going to address that with you on another night because we don't have time to do that tonight, but so we'll
Okay.
come back and talk about that piece of it. Tonight, we're just talking about the warrant article that we have suggested in response to the advisory committee's request. How can we arrange that something like that not happen to us again? The idea was proposed that we should set up a reserve fund specifically for what we're referring to as unanticipated, unbudgeted, and/or extraordinary costs of special education out-of-district tuitions and transportation. So in other words, the reserve fund would be set up, and when a situation like the one that arose in that year where we had the huge budget spike arose, hopefully we would have some funds in this reserve fund to smooth out the bump, so it isn't quite such a big hit on 1 year. So the article you have before you, it's been through town council already, so of course it has many more words in it than it did when we sent it to town council, so I won't read it to you. But it proposes 3 ways for funds to go into the reserve fund. And the idea was to have more than one way to choose to replenish the funds so that if we needed to at any given moment, we would have a variety of different ways to do that if we wanted to. The first would be that the school committee may transfer funds from the current year budget. And the idea behind that is that sometimes, like for example this year, it is anticipated that there will be funds unspent from the school budget, and that actually, ironically, is because of the very incident I just described, where students with very high tuitions moved out and money that was budgeted for that is remaining at the end of the year. That would offer an opportunity to move some funds into this fund so that in another year, if we run into that kind of a scrape again, we would have some funds to meet it with. Second way would be that the Board of Selectmen may transfer funds from the current year budget if the board chose. And as I mentioned in what I sent to you, this would probably only happen if the need were so great it couldn't be adequately served by whatever was in the fund at the time. But if you imagine if there was some other place in the budget where there was an excess, you could go there. And finally, town meeting might appropriate directly into it. And the funds would be dispersed in that year or some future year by a vote of the school committee for the purposes named in the legislation: unanticipated, unbudgeted, and/or extraordinary costs of special education, out-of-district tuitions, and/or transportation. And the reason for giving that, for assigning that task to the school committee was it had been suggested, well, why don't we maybe use the town's regular reserve fund instead of setting up a special one, use the town's reserve fund and just beef it up a little bit to account for something like this. And the problem with that is because the process of how money is spent out of the reserve fund, with a hearing before the Board of Selectmen and a hearing before the advisory committee, that raises problems with the confidentiality requirements around special education plans, where it would really not be possible to have a discussion in public about a need that arose because of a particular student or student's special education plan, where that student could possibly be identified in the course of the discussion. So that was the reason for assigning that role to the school committee. And I should mention that what you had before here, it turned out that there was a bill before the legislature that we thought was dead, we were told was dead. And then we learned that it had gone to the third reading and it is no longer dead, and it is very much like what we are proposing here. It's very similar. For example, the cap that is set for the fund of 2% of annual net school funding that notion came from that bill. It's a reserve fund that operates very much this way. That bill might pass, and if it did, what we're proposing is special legislation just for Hingham, but if that bill passed, it would create the possibility for any town to have such a reserve fund. And when we thought, well, should we wait and see if that bill passes? And we thought, well, you know what, let's boot and suspenders, what is it? Belt and suspenders, that's what it is. And let's design the legislation the way we would really like it. For example, their bill said shall not exceed 2% of annual net school funding. I can't remember how they put it, but the way it was in the bill, it wasn't clear what that number was or how you would determine what that was. So we defined it as annual net school spending as defined in Chapter 70 of Massachusetts General Law for prior fiscal year. In other words, the Department of Education calculates that number every year, so there's going to be no questioning, well, what should that number be? And that was a little vague in the bill that's before the legislature, so we nailed it down a little bit more. And we also thought, what if the bill comes forward, but it's amended in a way that we don't care for, or that we think wouldn't be right for us? So we decided to recommend that town meeting go for this special legislation. After all, and of course, we don't have to go through with it. If the bill passes and we think it's a better idea, we can do that, but this leaves us with another opportunity. So that is our presentation.
Wow, very good. Thank you. So just to recap, make sure we understand your proposal, is that we have an article before us that would petition the selectmen, or the town meeting to authorize the selectmen to then petition this article to the general...
to the legislature.
To the legislature.
For special legislation.
For special legislation. This would help frame, one, it incents the legislature to respond to this issue that they already have on their table, which is good. And two, it gives a framework, it puts our framework in motion as to what we think would be the best way to how we would like to solve the problem. Am I saying that?
Yeah.
That's the issue. Okay. You were here, Irma? Would you like to comment or
Yes,
question?
I like this. I heard the discussion at the school committee Monday night, and that was a very thorough, lively discussion. One question, what do you see as the checks and balances here? The money goes in, and it's only the school committee? And then who, trust but verify, who then looks at it? And I know all this would be done in open meeting and that, but then who looks at it, and maybe who looks at it and says, gee, we don't need to put as much, or, hey, we're using it up faster than we think, so maybe we ought to ramp up instead of 2%.
Well, you've asked two questions. The first is who looks at it, I guess, after the money has
Check
been
and
spent.
balance.
And it's pretty clear in the legislation what it may be spent for. And it can't be spent for anything other than unanticipated, unbudgeted, and/or extraordinary costs of special education, out-of-district tuitions, and/or transportation. And so I would think that our accounting department would see when money goes out, and the auditors would be looking to see that it was spent the way it should be spent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be our normal audit procedures.
And then in terms of when it comes in, when it gets replenished, anybody could take a look at that, and my guess is that a recommendation for that would come up through the budgeting process, much like it does for the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund, which is sort of similar, where we self-insure for unemployment compensation, we keep a trust fund, and sometimes it gets low, and we say, okay, we have a few extra claims this year, so we need, through the budgeting process, it comes out that we need to put a little more in it, or we discover that we didn't spend much last year, we don't need to put as much in it this year as we did last year. I think that would come out through
That's
the
a good
budgeting
analogy,
process.
actually.
Well, actually, that's the exact one we used with advisory, at least some of the advisory committees spoke to me about this. This is very similar to our municipal insurance trust, municipal property insurance trust, and our workers' compensation trust. And we present, as you know, in the budget process, those financial statements from those trust funds. And I would assume that you would do the same. You know, the school department would submit its budget, and they would also submit a summary of what transpired in the fund in the previous fiscal year. And that would lead either the school department or anybody else watching to a conclusion as to whether or not more funding should be added this year, or extra funding.
I have a feeling many other cities and towns may copy this?
Well, apparently there've been, the superintendent has been getting phone calls from other towns saying, what are you doing? And
And I can report that I have spoken to 2 area managers who heard this was going on and wanted to know what we were doing, and they're very interested in it. So we're all grappling with the same problems. I mean, I think, Laura, you cast it perfectly with the $500,000 number last year and how difficult that was. I mean, we're in a budget process right now. If I were to tell you tomorrow, when you've got a week or so left in the budget, oh, by the way, we have to come up with $500,000, and we have to. There's no choice. And that really means that the educational program in the school department would have to be degraded if we're not going to come up with more money.
Okay.
Good.
Okay. Paul, welcome.
Came in late, but thank you for what I did here.
well, if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
She taped it just for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the auditing.
Watch it.
Yeah. And I think Irma said it, the auditing process is the check that, that we would look for. And I guess, Ted, the school books are audited.
The school department is, not only is the school department part of the town's general audit, the school department gets a special A133 audit for compliance with any federal and state grant reporting requirements. But, we have several different checks and balances, and our budget process is an enormous check and balance. We have 3 members of the Board of Selectmen and 15 advisory committee members, in addition to the town administrator and the town accountant, all reviewing all the department budget documents. And I can tell you frequently we discover things in that process that we need to look at further for the audit process.
Okay. Any other comments? Any questions from the public on this discussion? Boy, you done good. Okay. Please, Joe, could you...
Wrong house here.
Could you come up, tell us?
My name is Joseph McCracken. I live at 8 Bulow Road in Hingham. I heard, because of my job and way back then, that people were hopping to different towns to get the better education. Is there any way to police that? There's no way to police it.
That's legal.
It is.
Yeah, I mean,
I bet. See, that's
first of all, I've run into a lot of municipal officials over the course of my, time on the Board of Selectmen, and I never ran into anybody who didn't think their town was a magnet for special education students.
Okay.
Everyone thinks that. I have met, I had next door neighbors who moved to town with a special education child from another town, thinking that this would be a better place for their child. And over the course of the year, they concluded that it wasn't, and they moved to yet another town. So I put myself in the place of these parents, and I think, if it were my child, I would do anything, and I would go anywhere. And I think a lot of them do. But I think it actually all evens out in the end. I don't think you can show that any one town attracts more special education kids than any other town.
Asking because I heard that they were loading up the new apartments over there in the shipyard with people that had problems, and it sounds silly, but they were coming into our school system, and that was what was going on. So
The actual numbers, if you look at the special ed, and Doc Gallo has them, we're not bad. I mean, we're not bad, not good. Our percentage, we do not have a higher than average percentage of kids with special needs.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe, for the comment. Any other questions?
Do we have a vote on this? Or
It's not on our vote list for this evening.
do we need to do something? for
You're going to have
now?
to take this is a warrant article, and,
So you would take a position
you would
on it.
take a position when you go through the rest of your articles.
All right, it
So you'll
is.
revisit when you,
We were hoping to get a vote before advisory.
yeah, because
and they're
advisory is going to hear it on
March 3rd or 4th.
next week, and usually they like to know what you think before they get there.
We don't have,
Need to read it?
we don't have to, do we have to read the motion or just, no?
Just read-
We
just to
read-
support or not
I
support.
think I'll entertain a motion to support the proposal for a special education reserve fund.
Second.
Mr.
Or,
Early?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you for your work. I know this was not easy.
Do the non-bylaw next?
Excuse me.
Good.
Thank you, Linda, thank you, Laura.
The flood map?
Okay, the next item on our agenda is Article Z, the noise bylaw. Declan? Please, welcome back. Dennis, Joe.
Good evening. So what I thought I'd do this evening...
Could just, Declan, be kind enough to introduce yourself to the folks at home. Thank you.
I'm Declan Boland, 338 Main Street. I'm chair of the noise bylaw committee, and in my right is Dennis King, who's a committee member, and have Joe here, who just spoke actually, who's also on the committee. I just give a little recap of where we were, and then just talk about what we're here tonight about. We met. After I'm finished, actually, I was going to get Dennis to go through the amended bylaw, but as I said, with the background, I just wanted to give you what's actually happened since we were here on January 23rd, which is the last Selectmen's meeting. We met again on February the 4th, and the objective of that meeting was to really take feedback that we received by emails and different informal channels, and also to have a meeting whereby people could actually discuss the bylaw with the view to amending it that would be more appropriate, palatable to go forward. And at the meeting we had a number of concerned citizens who represented themselves, and also different organisations. Irma attended also. We also had the police chief and the deputy police chief, etc. So we went through, we sort of used more a collaborative type of approach to the meeting, basically to say, as we go through the bylaw, what is palatable, basically, I think is a good word for it, and amended the bylaw as a result of that. At the meeting as well was Mike Barkley, who's here. He's on the advisory committee, and obviously advisories now begin to tee this thing up, is that should it be approved by the Selectmen, they need to be part of being ready in order to bring it along through the process. And Mike told me that actually he's already creating the narrative related to the warrant article, should it proceed, with the view that really sort of teeing this thing up, since we don't have a lot of time before town meeting to get it ready. We published a new draft, and we sent it for you for review, both in terms of the new wording and also the changes to the previous version. And then we published the new draft on the website, which was probably around February the 6th, something like that. Since then, we've had two forms of feedback. One was more informal, people out there just talking to different people. So clearly the bylaw created a sense of discussion regarding its appropriateness, its value, etc. And two specific feedbacks we did get. One was from Hingham Sports Partnership. It was copied in an email, whereby they felt is that the collaboration of that meeting, the whole effect of it, they felt as though they accomplished their needs in terms of objections, and they were relatively supportive, I think, of going forward. And then secondly, we did have an email, actually only today, from comments from the South Shore
Country Club Management Committee.
And they had specific concerns about their particular facility. Frankly, in looking at their comments, is actually we felt as though it was very easily overcome. So it's actually was taken a little bit out of context regarding the intent of the bylaw, and should be a non-issue. But actually, I'll address that offline with Mr. Friend, actually. So with that, I was going to ask Dennis then just to take us through basically the major changes to what we presented before, and then put it back to you then regarding how you wanted to proceed.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Dennis?
Taking a step back, the big picture here from the very outset of this process was that the Hingham Police Department asked us for a tool for them to do something other in response to a noise complaint than cite someone criminally for breaching the peace. And we went through a process. The first draft was rather broad, included an objective measurement measured by decibel level, in addition to a subjective test. And we found in the public commentary to that was people were, I think, fearful of it because they didn't know what to expect from it. And the board might recall that even as we presented it, we said we weren't noise experts, and if this, as a concept, was going to be adopted, we wanted it to be reviewed by a noise consultant and the like. But we found that the public commentary was such that just taking a pragmatic view, a cost-benefit analysis, we didn't think that the continued inclusion of the objective decibel level provision made sense. I'll use the word politically, but in terms of the public commentary, there was a point of resistance that we didn't think it made sense to pursue. And we talked to the chief of police and the deputy chief, and they ultimately concluded it wasn't necessary for their purposes either. So we took it out completely. So as it is right now, the bylaw contains no objective measure based on decibel level. It retains the subjective test, which is defined in the bylaw as a noise disturbance. But even as to that, there was public commentary. People were concerned that enforcement would change, and that was never the intent of the committee. It was never the intent of the department. And so we added clarifying language to the subjective test as well, to make it clear that the test was identical to the test that had historically been applied by the department in determining whether someone had breached the peace under the relevant Massachusetts criminal statute. So basically, this bylaw, as presently presented to the board, is intended to do a single thing, and that is to give the police a civil alternative to enforcement of noise complaints. It is very clear that the test to be applied in doing so is identical to the test that has been applied historically. The only other substantive change that we have made is to put in here a definite time period for engaging in certain things, such as construction activity can't start before 7, commercial landscaping can't start before 7. And that's another thing that the department asked us to do, and that is in here now. So I think we have addressed fully all of the public commentary we've received. I think the message to be sent to the citizens of Hingham is nothing is going to change except that you will not be cited criminally and will be cited civilly if you do breach the peace. So I think this is now in a form to be presented to the town meeting, and we are pleased with the final result.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Chief Perino, Mike, would you like to comment?
Mike Perino, Police Chief. First of all, I want to thank the committee for all the hard work they did. And this article, like any other article that goes before the town, you come up with a draft, you get feedback from the community, and then you come up with a final draft. And that's what we did. And we heard from the citizens, we heard from the sports partnership group, and we changed. You know, the big thing that we as a police department, and me as a chief, we finally will have times, okay, with these violations. Okay, it's been, I mean, literally, you know, 3 weeks ago we had an incident with a contractor. He was like, oh, I didn't know about any times, you know. So we'll finally have a time period where, you know, it's right there in a bylaw that you cannot start before 7 o'clock. Dumpsters can't be emptying dumpsters before 7 o'clock. And so when people call and complain to us because it's interrupting their sleep, we can act now. And we don't have to charge them with disturbing the peace. We can give them a citation, but just as we've done for the last 20, 30 years, we talk to people, tell them, look, you need to quiet it down, okay? And most people will, you know. But if we have to go back there 2 days later, which we had to do not too long ago, here's your citation, you know.
Okay.
So, again, thank you for all the work you guys did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
My
name is John Hersey. I'm glad to see the outcome of this because I thought it was a joke to begin with. So I'm glad to see I'm glad to see the outcome was where we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. I think if, Mr. Healy?
Question, please.
Sure.
The Jake breaks. What's up with that? Don't we have a Chapter 90 provision that we can do that with? No. What's the mechanism? You issue the civil citation, they ignore it, what happens then?
Yeah.
You mean they ignore the civil citation? They just don't pay it? Well, then we take them to court.
So it's enforceable through some kind of court action?
Well, we can take them to court just like if people don't pay the marijuana civil citation.
Is that like through a clerk's hearing?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, we would set up for a hearing, and that's what we do when people don't pay the marijuana citations.
Chief, what is with the breaking? I mean, where is that a problem?
We've had complaints like down at, before 228 and 3A, when they're coming into the intersection, they'll use their J brakes there. We've had on the hill coming down from, Main Street between Cushing Street and High there, where they're coming down, they'll put them on there to slow down their vehicle instead of hitting.
So how do you envision that working? A citizen calls and says, that truck is using its Jake brakes, you pull the unit over and issue a citation?
The thing is, we get enough complaints, these trucks travel the same routes.
Okay.
If somebody's doing it, like,
So you sit there?
we just sit there and wait for them.
All right. Thank you.
There is actually signage on 228.
It's yellow, though.
Maybe so, but there's, the signs are there. Why put the signs there?
They're
if you're not-
unenforceable.
So what do we need to do? How do we make it enforceable?
Well, this is kind of what I'm getting at striking the bylaw.
Yeah. Oh. So if we vote this, now we have it enforceable.
I'm just, okay. I don't want to be
Chief Hingham.
difficult.
There is a provision in a motor vehicle citation that you can cite them for a violation of a town bylaw. We don't usually use them because the fines are way out of whack, and you can actually, there's provisions to cite somebody for following too close under a town bylaw. The fine is lower, though, because they haven't been changed since 1937, so it might be a $15 fine or a $20 fine, but there's also similar ones. So in the case of this, would actually go to that type of a citation and bring it to court that way, and it would be payable through the clerk's office the way a normal citation would be.
Okay.
All right, just,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, Irma, some
I
questions?
just want to thank the committee for being willing to go back and take into consideration the needs of the police department, which were paramount here, but also all the input from the public, because we did get it. And I sent out an email to the same groups that I had sent the first one out. And really, you're seeing the one today with some thoughtful consideration. But all the other people I've either called them because I didn't hear from them, or I got an email saying we're good, which was fine. So I think now the big thing is to socialize this, because town meeting floor will be the arbiter.
I'd like to comment as well.
Sure. Mr. Healy?
I echo my colleagues' comments, and I think it's admirable that Mr. McCracken, Paul, and Mr. King, Sergeant Phillips continued in the face of, I wouldn't characterize it as hostile, but it was a spirited response by the community, and I think that shows the value of a good committee that stays calm, stays focused, listens to the public, factors in the public response, and crafts something that I think will be a good working tool for the police department and improve the quality of life in this town. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Paul, I actually described it to some of my colleagues as the town folks showing up with torches and pitchforks.
They were capped, though.
Regardless of how you
Quietly, though,
characterize it,
quietly.
we heard the message. revise it accordingly.
I
Responded brilliantly. Thank you.
Thank you. I echo Paul and Irma's comments. I'd like to add, it had always been my intention to give Hingham some publicity. I got a call the day after from KCBC in Calgary, Alberta, to query me on the discussion that had happened that week. And I asked them where they heard it, and they got it from Fox News. So the objective of giving publicity to Hingham had been accomplished, except it was not exactly the wrong. I understood I heard that your daughter read it in the London.
Yes, she sent me a link from England on the news.
The London
being
Mail,
carried there.
so-
Which, of course, ran a picture of a snowblower, which was exempt. Accuracy in the media.
I heard from some people I worked with in Ohio when I worked for First Energy that I hadn't heard from in literally 10 years. I was like, wow.
Yeah, so, but despite all of that, as I said in the discussion I had with live with the announcer in Calgary, I said, this is where a story can go viral without the facts being confirmed. And I think it gave us an opportunity, and when they saw the rationale that our police chief and the police officers in this town had an option of a criminal offense or nothing, that didn't seem justifiable to us, and that was its intent. And I think trying to get a standard was the issue that you laid out there, and you rightfully said, we don't understand this, and we want to go back and visit again, and you did. So you deserve a lot of commendations. I want you to know, for being a volunteer on this, you get our gratitude and thanks. I wish there were more. You probably have thicker hides now, but that's...
We'll be looking around for some more hot potatoes. Thank you very much.
So is this ready for voting, Mr. Town Administrator?
We have to
This has
open the
not-
warrant.
This has not been included in the warrant.
So we have to open the warrant. We know when we're going to do that. Okay, we will do that.
The board has to open up the warrant to include the article on it, and then they have to vote their position.
So if we go to advisory what they're suggesting next Thursday, do we need, maybe Mike, ask you, how do we handle that from?
Just hold on one second, I can tell you that from Betty. Betty, when are we planning on opening the warrant?
I believe next Thursday, early
So
in the
next
meeting.
Thursday, the selectmen are going to open the warrant, add a couple of articles, vote their recommendations, and advisory will have it later that evening.
Okay. So then, we're just having this conversation offline, but, so our plan then would be the same, just to have a discussion next Thursday?
Leah, let me talk to Greg McKeon, the chair, just, again, this is, let him know where we stand on it now, and that would be the goal, would be to have a vote, certainly a substantive discussion about it next Thursday.
Okay.
Now, when they vote that would be Greg's decision as to when he puts that on the agenda. But since this was not on the filed list of warrant articles to be voted, we have to do that by opening the warrant, and we'll do that. So we'll do that in sufficient, the understanding, I have a discussion with Greg regularly so that we're in sync to make sure that things like this happen at the same time. Okay? So, thank you. Thank you very much.
While the police chief is here, you may want to vote your special police officers.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll do that.
The special police officers before Mike leaves. Betty suggested that.
Yeah.
Let's shift away from
Chief Perino, just one of our vote list items tonight are the special police officers.
Good idea.
Might as well just vote.
You were going to come back, right? You were going to come back, right?
Doing it now?
Yeah, we'll do it now. Yeah, so the baby called. You should all know Mike is a new grandfather.
Yes.
And he says he's sleeping, but nobody else in the house is, so, okay.
That's good. That's good you're getting the full night's
So,
sleep. Good.
Okay.
Okay, as you know, every year we come before the board and request that the board reappoint our special police officers, and all these officers have been through the municipal training committee down in Plymouth. They do it every year, and they all have to be, get their certification before January 1st so that they can be specials for the following year. So they have all, their training includes the powers of arrest, constitutional law, criminal procedures, CPR, first aid, AED, and they're all weapons qualified. The names before you are the people that I'd like to see you appoint for special police officers. They help us out with details, all our holiday events, because obviously we don't have the manpower, so we need these people.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Any comments from Mr. Healy, since you're a liaison with the police department? Would you?
I spoke to the chief this morning, and I'm satisfied that he's got the matter well in hand. Make a motion to appoint the following as special police officers for the ensuing year: Brian Azure, Mark Brennan, Kenneth Corson, Joseph Driscoll, Daniel Galvin, Jonathan Gordon, Holly Krakonis, Ronald Lincoln, Joseph Mayer, Joseph McCracken, Michael McHugh, Michael Murray, Michael Parker, Mitchell Powers, Michael Riley, Charles Souther, Joan Sullivan, Russell Way, James Wells, and Brian Willard.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Healy, Mr. Alexiadis, we have a transfer on the Shrek.
Correct. In your packages, you should have a reserve fund transfer in the amount of $63,446 for the South Shore Emergency Communications Center. This is the difference between the assessment that the center set for the year for the town of Hingham and what we budgeted. If you recall, last year, we were in a similar situation to this year. Our budget process is a little ahead of them. And at the time, we chose not to adjust the budget upwards as we were moving into town meeting, because part of the budget included a reserve fund that the dispatch center was going to begin as its own entity creating, just like we have our own fund balance. I had made a request of the board that they consider not building that reserve this first year and keep our assessments at a lower level. So two things transpired. They didn't build the reserve, and they didn't keep the numbers at a lower level, predominantly because of other unanticipated cost overruns, predominantly around staffing and training. We have a legally signed agreement with the four towns. We're bound by the votes that the board takes, regardless of my position on the votes. And 3 of the 4 towns accept the assessments, they're law. So essentially, we are stuck with paying this additional assessment. I know that the board asked me for audit work of the Regional Dispatch Center, and I did ask IXP, the company that's been managing the center, through consulting arrangements, to give me a proposal to do that work. Many of you know, or you all know, that the point person from IXP Corp., Mr. Al Wallace, passed away a few weeks ago. He was the person that was going to be doing this work. We're in discussions with IXP right now of a replacement, and they have to make a decision of whether they're going to be able to give us one. Mr. Wallace was their sole resource in this region. So they're reallocating resources from other areas of the country, and I'm going to have to go back to a different firm if you want to look for audit work. I just don't think IXP is going to be in a position to do that at this point in time. Part of my thoughts was to go back to Powers and Sullivan and ask them if they similarly want to look at an engagement to give you some of the answers you want. The other 3 towns, didn't feel the need to conduct an independent audit.
So what are we going to do? Let me get to the bigger question. We have a dispatch center budget hanging out there for next year that we haven't voted yet.
Correct. And the budget that I've given you is a $750,000 budget. The preliminary estimates, based on the budget that we were given about a month ago, and again, Mr. Wallace was doing those budgets. We are now having existing personnel within the department and some staff from IXP that they're trying to give us as assistance to rebuild that budget. We have a budget meeting set for Monday as a board. The preliminary estimates showed a budget number for us of $758,000. I have a request in for $750,000. I'm not inclined to change my request right now. I wasn't comfortable with the budget numbers last year. I'm not comfortable with the budget numbers this year. But I remind you that I'm just one of 4 votes on that board. And so my recommendation would be to go forward with the $750,000 budget for this year. It's likely going to be slightly under the annual assessment from the district. I'm sure that we could find other areas in the budget to compensate for that if we have to throughout the year. But I'm reluctant to increase to that full amount without a better explanation as to why we need those numbers. I don't serve on the budget subcommittee, on that committee, so I'm sort of sitting like you are as board members, waiting for information to come in.
Okay.
Sorry I can't give you a more detailed explanation, but that's all I've got.
Okay. Irma, any comments?
The only thing I will share here, I went through my old budget stuff, and in 2009, that 7-something number may actually be a pretty good number. I hate to say it, if we consider that we're kind of flat, because the 2009 budget was $479,000. If you load that with, say, 25% for benefits, you're awfully close to the 750. So we actually come out neutral. I'm not saying that's the right number or a good number, because we anticipated. I also found the savings letter. Haven't found the backup yet.
Let me know when you get that.
Oh, trust me. The savings were anticipated to be approximately $190,000 the first year, plus $25,000 in savings for a reduction in contracts.
And just for
computers,
clarification,
contracts.
that was not a letter authored by me.
That is correct.
Okay.
It was from the chief of police to the town administrator at the time.
And it wasn't the current chief of police.
No, I'm sorry, it was Tab Mills. Sorry.
So, as you know, Irma, at the time I was finance director for the town, and I would not include those cost savings in the budget because I did not believe they were
We
realistic.
didn't include them in
And
advisory.
didn't.
Absolutely
I remember you were chair
not.
at the time, and you agreed with me.
Yep.
I think in my original analysis when I looked at this showed that this was a little south of a break even, in that we were spending more than we had spent for dispatch services independent of the 4-town region. It doesn't look like that in the appropriation, but as you pointed out, with benefits, a lot of our savings came in that we don't pay healthcare costs for the employees, so that reduced our healthcare budget, and we don't pay pension costs for them. Those are all borne by the district and comes through in assessments. So we're essentially getting it all in one line item. But of course, as you know, what I'm up against is the expectation that was set when the project was sold to the community here, which is not what was sold in the other 3 towns. None of the other 3 managers, and I went back and spoke with Bill Griffin, who was doing this in Cohasset at the time, not one of the managers ever made a statement in those communities that this was going to be a money saver. Right. It was going to be efficiencies, it was going to be a cost avoidance, and it would be an improvement in services. I certainly understand the position of the town of Hingham in that, if I was told I was going to save money and I didn't, well, you guys know me from working on the budgets, I usually don't take that answer well. So I appreciate that, but the numbers are what they are.
Mike, since you're here, could I, one of the selling points was the improved service, and it started with the count of calls. We were in a manual system, and now we went to an automated system.
That's why, the truck that we have right now is working very well. And as a police chief, I'm glad we have it. They're doing a great job up there, and when it comes to blizzards, all the holiday events we have in town, it's so much nicer to have 6 to 8 dispatchers up there taking care of calls than just the 2 that we used to have. So with the cost that it's costing, I will tell you, you're getting a better service. The technology is way ahead of what we had. When advisory came down to look at our center, the dispatch, what we have downstairs, it was junk. We were going to have to replace everything. So I'm very enthused by the dispatch center. Even with the passing of Al Wallace, I will tell you that the dispatch center has not missed a beat in doing their jobs. If you're asking me, it's a success to me, and I think it's only going to get better. The deputy and I met with every member of the Hingham Police Department back in September to discuss all issues within our department. And one of the questions we asked was, what do you think of the Shrek? How's it doing? And almost everybody said it's gotten a lot better. In the beginning, we had complaint forms we had the officers fill out. The deputy would go through them and then present them to the Shrek. These are the issues we're having. We haven't had complaint forms in months. It's definitely getting better, and it's going to get better.
That's great. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Paul, any edit?
Anecdotally, about 35 years ago, I racked a cruiser up at Maine and Cushing, and Mike brought my wife up to the South Shore Hospital to see me. So Captain Schmidt decided I should ride the desk for a few months to kind of readjust myself. And I had the experience of working as a dispatcher, and sometimes you only get that very brief opportunity to get the call right when somebody's on the other end of the line and it's literally life and death. So, to the residents of the town, I can't understate the importance of having a top-notch quality dispatch center, not only to receive the calls, but to give them out with clarity, to understand and appreciate the needs of the officers. I took a tour when, 6 months or so ago, and it's a very different world than the one I was exposed to. But the mission is the same, and that's to protect the residents. And, I think that this is a vital part of the public safety process. So it's good to hear that the dispatch center is working as the chief expects, and I look forward to hearing continued good things about it.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hersey?
My name is John Hersey. We're a host community here. It seems like we're going to our reserve funds. How about the other participants? Are they going to their reserve funds to support this, or are we the only one that are putting a lot of money into this? What's going on there?
The reserve fund transfer request that I've asked you to or presented to you tonight deals with our assessment. The town of Hingham's assessment is $63,000, $63,446 lower. Our budget is lower than the assessment given to us by the four towns. So, John, this is about just paying our fair share of the bill, not about reserves or not about emergency expenditures. So the other towns paid their full share.
So it's not going into any specific cause? I mean, just the overall running of the Shrek?
Correct.
Okay. When this year was first incepted, I think the people involved, and I think I'm looking at a couple of them right here, were kind of pig-headed. Okay, because I've already done my homework years ago. There was an individual that was on the committee early on, very early on, and he opened his mouth, and he has very serious concerns going forward. And he made a suggestion that, before you people vote on this, maybe you ought to take a ride down to this state and that state and this state and that state, like I have. I know I've been there. I've seen what goes on, and take a look and see how they're doing it. And that's the last time we ever heard this guy. He was thrown off the committee because they didn't want to hear it. It was such a rush through to put this thing in, and now it's been a failure. And it caused a death, from what I understand, Mike, from what I've been told, because of this incompetency early on. And I'm very, very sad that it had to go this way, the whole thing. I think it could have been done a lot better if we waited a little bit instead of this rush to put this thing through. So that's all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
All right, I'll entertain, let me just comment on the service that, when you go from a manual to an automatic service, which is what we did, building a database with information in it that has to work across 4 towns, that enables police departments and fire departments to coordinate activities. There's no dollar value that you can put on that. The fact that Mike has a records and he can tell what time a call came in and what time it got to the police vehicle that's responding, and there's a track record on that. That all creates data that over the long term improves the benefit of the service. And we've heard from him tonight on what his support for this is, and when he says that, he's saying that as he responds to the needs of citizens. So in fairness to the people who put this together, it was the first regional effort. And the governor and lieutenant governor at the time put their neck on the lines to make this started. We got some money to start this. It was a struggle because they were dealing with a long history of this. While it could have gone better, and as Irma and I, who both worked in mechanization efforts over the course of our careers, nothing goes as originally planned, and this was one of those cases. But the response, particularly by Hal Wallace, God rest his soul, in helping to fix this, because he brought the technical expertise to it to get it, is a credit to him and his memory. So with that being said, I'd like to have a motion, Irma, if you would, on the...
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the transfer request from the reserve fund to dispatch assessment in the amount of $63,446.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Okay, Mr. Alexiadis, we have a open meeting law discussion. This has to do with a letter we received from Town Council. We've discussed this before. Would like to enter this into the minutes of the record?
Okay, this is this ongoing discussion amongst the three of you, through me, about attendance at meetings outside of your regularly scheduled meeting. Mr. Chairman, you've asked me to get an opinion from Town Council. You have it with you. And I think we still have the dilemma where we have some of you wanting to be at the same meeting when it's not a posted meeting of the Board of Selectmen. And I think you guys have to talk about it amongst yourselves and figure out how you want to address that.
Okay, I want to address it. I know, Irma, you've had discussion with the state and the Ethics Commission, and you got a different interpretation. All right, can you give us the name of that attorney?
It's actually the Attorney General's office, and I will read the law.
No, I'm asking for the name of the attorney that gave you this.
It wasn't the attorney, it was the Attorney General who pointed me to this particular section of the law, and I'd like to read this into the record. This is the Open Meeting Law, Section 18. Under definitions, they define what a meeting is, but then they say, meeting a deliberation of a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction, provided, however, meeting shall not include, and this is paragraph C, attendance by a quorum of a public body at a meeting of another public body that has complied with the notice requirements of the open meeting law, so long as the visiting members communicate only by open participation in the meeting on those matters under discussion by the host body and do not deliberate. That's very concise. And an example, I sat in at the beginning of the FOSS committee meeting. I'm glad I did. I have a much better understanding, which you would never see in the minutes, nor in any feedback, of the challenges that group faces. So more than one selectman can go to a meeting. You can participate, which I would never do, but you can't deliberate. It's an open meeting.
What's the date of that law?
The law, this one is, no, this came right, I did it again tonight. It's 2010. It came right off the website. It is Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, paragraphs 18 through 25, effective July 1st of 2010. There's an update to the Attorney General's Open Meeting Law Guide for September 2012 that makes the reading of what I just read a little easier. and I'll read it this way: members of a public body may attend a meeting of another public body, provided that they communicate only by open participation. However, they cannot deliberate at such gatherings. That's much easier to read.
Okay, that's very
Okay?
clear.
And very honest, and the town council's opinion, which is 2, 3, 4 pages, is exactly this.
Well, that's not the way I read the December 5th, 2013 letter, and he references the Attorney General's letter of March 28th, 2013, which bring clarification to it, and he says that cannot happen. The Attorney General, and I've heard her say this personally, the Attorney General has commented that if I talk with one of you in a meeting, I am deliberating when I express my opinion. That is deliberation. That is her, whether I agree with it or not, that is her interpretation, and that's what this document says. So I am on the advice of counsel, we should not go to meetings together unless we want to post them. That's the way it's supposed to work. I don't know, Mr. Healy, you're a lawyer. Do you have a comment on this?
Well, I have an observation. I sat on a 5-member board for 19 years, so the open meeting law was something that we always respected, but it was a little easier to comply with than it is when you sit on a 3-member board. And I think the only real red zone that this comes up is in our liaison capacities, where we're tasked to go to other meetings for other boards. And my concern is that if I'm going to a meeting as a liaison, it's my expectation that I report back to Ted Alexiadis, and he conveys whatever appropriate information to the two of you, so you know what's going on. And I look forward to getting the same kind of input from him about things the two of you go to meetings that I don't go to. I'm nervous that if I go to a meeting in a liaison capacity, because I don't go to the meetings where I'm not a liaison, because that's your department, and I start chit-chatting about things or issues, such as I did today at some length with the FOSS committee meeting, because I think that there was a very different view of the mission. I don't know whether, if we have to make subsequent decisions and two of us are at that meeting, one of us doesn't talk but the other one does, are they hearing me think and kind of articulate? Does that constitute a deliberation? And I work for a living. I'm a lawyer, and I just don't want to run afoul of the open meeting law. I just don't want the hassle of it. So if there's any question at all, I'd rather err on the side of caution. That's all I'm saying. Between the work as the selectmen and going to the different secondary meetings, I call them secondary assignments, that takes up a lot of time. And I think we each have about 10 different subcommittee groups that we go to. I don't see the need to overlap into the other groups. I can respect if somebody's very interested in something, but I just think it creates too much of a risk that we could run afoul of this law, and I don't think the government's going to give us much of a.
No, and this Attorney General is right on. I mean, as I said, I may not agree with her and her position on this, because I think Irma makes a good point in that. But the law is the law, and I don't want to put our position in jeopardy for open meeting law violations. So I am going to make a motion that we follow the advice of counsel as determined in his December 5th, 2013 letter.
I have to second that, and I'll tell you why. Because if that's the guidance that the lawyer retained by the town to give us the advice to protect us says we should do, I don't see a compelling reason to depart from that recommendation.
But that's not what his letter says.
I can clarify for you, because, Irma, you've brought this up to me multiple times.
I have, and I've read the letter of the law.
And I've actually asked Mr. Coughlin, based on your interpretation of the law,
I'm reading it, I'm not interpreting it.
okay, your reading of the law, and he indicates that he read that, he considered that, and that's just not accurate, and that deliberation can be construed as being one selectman speaking and the other listening in a public body. And so...
And that's what he says in the second paragraph, and I'll read it. Any deliberation by the members of the Board of Selectmen at such a meeting would constitute a violation of the open meeting law. That is, communicating directly with each other, responding to each other's comments, expressing opinion on matters within their jurisdiction, and/or deliberating in any way or manner within their jurisdiction. That is his interpretation, and I'm going to not permit, as chairman, that is the rule we should follow.
I want to be crystal clear about this. I asked him point blank. 2 selectmen go to the meeting, one speaks, the other says nothing. He said, you have a potential open meeting violation. It's what the basis of the light plant open meeting violation when the selectmen attended that meeting several years ago.
That was definite deliberation. So I'm going to follow the letter of the law.
The letter of the law is expressed by town council. That's the letter of the law as far as this board is concerned. If you object, you can vote no, but that's my interpretation. I have a motion.
I seconded it.
If you don't want to second it, you can abstain or do what you will.
I'll vote no.
All those in favor? Aye.
No.
But motion passes 2-1.
How did this issue come up, and why did the town council write that letter?
The issue came up it came up in a number of different occasions where liaison assignments had been made and 2 people were going to a meeting.
Did someone complain though, or did someone notice it on the board, or what?
We noticed it on the board.
The board brought the issue.
And we said, oh, is that permissible? That's why, and we need legal guidance, and that's what got the letter. Okay. Okay. We have a vote on a contract. Have you all read the contract?
Yep.
Any comments? It's the memorandum of agreement between the Teamsters and the town of Hingham, Teamsters Local 25. Any questions?
I'll move that we sign the memorandum of agreement between the town of Hingham, Massachusetts and Hingham Teamsters Local 25, effective July 1, 2013 through June 30th, 2016.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And Irma, if you'd be kind enough to...
Okay, we got to do this one, Chip.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion to appoint John Emler as Hingham's representative to the Boston Harbor Islands Advisory Council.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye. Great
And
choice.
tonight, just to remind, last week we had a discussion on the flood map revisions, and I know I got a few calls from people who are concerned about those revisions, and we have an appeal due date of March the 1st, which is this Saturday.
Correct, and I think we have here a vote for you to authorize submittal of the flood map as prepared by GZA and FEMA.
It's here.
Yep, oh, I've got it, yep. So I make the
Do you want me
motion.
to do it?
Sure.
And I'd make a motion to authorize submittal of flood map revision as prepared by GZA to FEMA.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Is there anything else? Give that to Betty, please, thank you. I think that's,
I got a couple
yes,
things.
Mr. Healy. Yeah.
And I got a couple of
Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me for being a little late getting into the meeting, but I was sitting in as liaison to the FOS committee meeting, as we talked about earlier. And the committee is about to embark on I'm hoping, an exciting process of coming up with a suitable memorial to honor Seaman Foss down at the waterfront. So I would encourage the public to, pay attention to that and participate in the meetings. Come to a meeting. And if you have an idea or a vision as to what you think would be an appropriate way of honoring Mr. Foss, I'd encourage you to to speak out. Carol Meyer wrote an excellent article about Herbert Foss, which appears in today's Journal, and the newspaper is speaking to it in its own way. There's no design that's been formed as of this point. We're going through a vetting process, and that's going to take time. But there's a lot of talent in this town, a lot of good boards, whether it's the Planning Board, the ZBA, the Conservation Commission, the Harbor Development Committee, the Historical Commission. This is something that we hope lasts a very long time. There's been some interest outside of town, too, with one of the ideas. I was contacted today by an architect who has worked with the state to develop the Korean War Memorial down in the Charlestown Navy Yard, as well as the memorial, the Vietnam Memorial out by UMass. As we were attending the meeting tonight, one of the residents brought out the fact that there is not one Medal of Honor winner in this town or has links to this town, but there are 5. So, I mean, the discussion is a town-wide one. It's not limited to the members of the Foss Committee or the 3 of us sitting here. I invite you to participate and to pay attention to this, because this is an expression of how we honor and pay tribute to a very brave man doing a very brave act, but not only just Seaman Foss, the men and women who serve in uniform in this country, putting their lives on the line every day so that we can, sit up here and freely disagree with each other. So that's all I have to say, but, I really appreciate if you pay attention to this. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Irma?
I've got 3 things. First, I want to congratulate Bob Mosier on the article in this past weekend's Patriot Ledger on his carving. We are so lucky to have Bob is a master carver, and we have Bill Sarney in town as well. And he gave a talk at the James Library in Norwell, but both of those men are just marvelous at carving. And I've been elected to the MMA Policy Committee for Public Works, Construction, and Transportation. And today we met with Senator Brian Joyce on the transportation bond bill to discuss the details of the bill, and with respect to, it was talking about Chapter 90, which is our road building money. There is a lot of good work going on that they're now going to look at a 5-year bond bill and a $300 million bond bill, we hope. But the devil is in the details, and the good news is we're going to get the money, and you'll be able to plan for 5 years. But the stinky little details is what we were talking about. And I'll be briefing Ted and Roger, and then he'll be able to tell my colleagues what's happened. The bill is in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and they're targeting it to go to the floor in the next couple weeks. So there was a great deal of good work. I want to thank Roger Fernandez, who gave me some excellent comments, and the room was about 25 people on this committee, and the room was pretty consistent in what we didn't like and what we did like, so that was really good.
That's good.
And the last thing, there are still memberships. Listen close on this one. This is a good one, as the snow is coming. There's still memberships available at the South Shore Country Club. There aren't many, but there are still some available for this coming year. So I'd urge you to go to the website, and if you're interested, take a look and sign up. And then don't forget, on these yucky winter days, they've still got bowling over there, and the golf simulator, and the Greenside Grill, which has just been redecorated. That's it.
Good, thank you. Thank you for that. This Sunday, we will have at 2 p.m. a town forum, which we discussed last week, but I want to remind you that it starts at 2 o'clock here in the Sanborn Auditorium, and the principal issue of discussion is the Aquarian Water Company and the Water Acquisition Study Committee reports, and reports that we'll be sharing with you on some other work that has gone on since the last time we had a public discussion on this. So I urge you to attend. Tonight, as the liaison to that committee and the representative of the selectmen. I met with the other towns who are serviced by Aquarian, the towns of Hull and Cohasset, to update them and give them the information as to what we will discuss on Sunday. So they had some other suggestions for us, which we'll talk about on Sunday. But I hope your calendars can permit your attendance. This is a considerable issue, and you'll see why the committee has moved forward with its recommendations to pursue this. With that, I'd like we have to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing real estate negotiations, because discussion of this matter in open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. Mr. Healy?
So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Aye, aye. Okay, and we will be adjourning and will not come back to this meeting. We'll see you Sunday, hopefully. Stay safe.